Hey, this is Mark Pattison back again with another exciting episode of Finding Your Summit. And I got to tell you, I have been on a great streak with having a bunch of really wonderful guests on and sharing their stories and opening up. And I've got another really cool guy this week. He's a guy that I aspire to be like, despite he's a few years younger than me. But, you know, here's a guy that grew up in the Northwest and went to Yale. That obviously is not, you know, any kind of adversity. But what happened after going to Yale, like so many college students, he set out and wanted to go around the world and travel and explore. And he was in Asia. He was in Thailand, and he was on a beach and was doing something called a kerosene jump rope. And that rope ended up wrapping around his legs, catching him on fire, and he ended up burning 25% of his body. The doctors told him that he would probably never walk again the same way. He was laid up literally immobile for over 18 months. His mother was a huge positive influence in his life in terms of kind of the vision board of where do you want to go and what can you see yourself doing. And so one of the things that he set out as a goal initially was to become a triathlete. And so he ended up winning his first one of all things. And then after that, he got a sponsorship and somebody, you know, funded his way towards becoming a professional, traveled all over the world. And then he cooked up this whole idea about trying to become the first guy, speed record, to climb the 7 summits and go to the North and South Pole, which he did. And just really amazing to talk to this guy. He's very insightful, very smart. And, you know, it's just really focused on, you know, when you're faced with tough things, tough people find their way through tough times. And he did that. So kudos to him. And as always, we really appreciate the love and continue to go and rate, review. It helps. And we're getting more and more really cool people to come onto the show. So with that said, let's get into Colin. It's a great interview. Bye. Hey, it's Mark Pattison back again with another exciting segment of Finding Your Summit. And this week, here's a guy I actually sort of look up to in a way, from the standpoint of he has done a lot of the things that I am attempting to do in terms of scaling these different mountains around the world, and also go and get to the North and South Pole. His name is Colin O'Brady. Almost sounds very Irish.
Yes, indeed.
Is that true?
It's actually a made-up last name. My mom's last name's Brady, and my dad's last name's O'Connor, and they're hippies in the 80s and mixed their names up to give me my name. So
that is great.
More hippie Pacific Northwest roots than Ireland, but many generations back, I think there's some Irish roots in there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you know, normally I do these podcasts, and it's through Skype just because everybody's all over the country or world when I do these, and we hail actually both from the Northwest. You are now living in Portland. I'm from Seattle. And today you decided to fly down to Hermosa Beach, California, World HQ, where I do most of my broadcast. And glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's great. It's always nice to be down in sunny Southern California. So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So okay. So we share this love of the Northwest, and that's where I did a lot of my climbing and outdoors stuff with my parents growing up. I read that you're from Olympia, Washington, and for all those people who don't know about Olympia, Washington, that is the capital of the great state of Washington.
Yeah, so I was born in Olympia. My parents were students at Evergreen State College, and ended
talk
up
about
there
hippies.
for a little bit. Yeah, exactly. So, but I only lived there till I was 9 months old. So I don't have the deepest roots in Olympia, although that's where I was born. But my family moved to Portland when I was very young, and grew up in Portland. And even as Portland is blowing up these days with people moving there from all over the place, I'm one of the few actually natives, not born, but raised there.
So did you spend your time, I look back at some of the other mountains you've climbed, and we've done a lot of the same ones. I actually did Mount St. Helens before it blew.
Nice.
Yeah,
wow, that's cool.
Well, I was younger, and my dad took me up, and, I thought it was just amazing. I had to jump over a crevasse, and, it was scary at the time, but that was really my first exposure. And then to be alive and at that time where it literally blew its top and covered all of Washington and Oregon was truly an amazing event to be a part of, like an atomic bomb or something going off. But so is that where you started this whole outdoor, your love, cutting your teeth on those mountains?
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate to have, parents who embrace and love the outdoors. And, my parents weren't huge mountaineers or climbers, but definitely my dad was an Eagle Scout, loved to go backpacking, hiking, biking around in the backcountry and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of where it grew for me. I didn't grow up with a lot of money, but the Pacific Northwest is a great place to be from because, as you know, you can pretty much drive 15 minutes in any direction. You're at a beautiful lake or a river or a mountain or a trailhead or something like that. So that's really what we spent our free time doing as a kid, and it certainly instilled a love and passion for the outdoors for me that grew from there.
For sure, we are two birds of the same feather. I did not get on an airplane until I was 18 years old, and that plane trip was to Hawaii, and I went to Hawaii on a recruiting trip, so It wasn't even paid. So my parents were school teachers. I love that, but, it wasn't about having to, travel all over the world like so many people do now, like my kids did. We'd literally get in our little VW Bug and they'd stuff us in the back and offer a camping trip. And so, what a great way to grow up and all that bonding and just, I had as much fun as anybody else was going anyplace else.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a big family as well, a number of siblings. And with the same type of thing, just get in the car, drive somewhere, go explore outside. It's funny you say that about recruiting trip. For me, going the other direction, I had never been to the East Coast or New York City before, but my first time there was for my recruiting trip at Columbia when I was 16 years old. It was September 20th, 2011. So 9 days after September 11th, I landed in New York City to experience New York City for the first time. But the same thing for a recruiting trip, not because I was on some trip or something like that. So it looks like sports and collegiate sports and things took us both in that direction. Of course, that's been a through line for both of us in our lives since then.
Yeah. So, and you were recruited in what sport?
I swam in college.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you look like you have a swimmer's body, right?
Yeah. I didn't end up staying in New York City. I swam at Yale, in Connecticut. But ended up on the East Coast, which was a big change from the Pacific Northwest, without a doubt. But collegiate swimmer, which was a great experience.
By the way, Yale, the town is
New Haven, Connecticut.
New Haven, and it's one of my favorite towns I've ever been in. I mean, I drove in there. My daughter was on a recruiting trip. And went back, and she was being looked at by Bridgeport down the street, which isn't quite New Haven, but we did drive down 20 minutes or whatever. And she as we were going in towards Yale, she was like, "This looks like Hogwarts."
Yeah.
It's just this old Gothic, beautiful structure. Yeah. And so what a thrill, I'm sure, to go to Yale.
Oh, it was a great experience and certainly a wonderful privilege for me coming, like I said, public school kid from Portland, Oregon, showing up on that campus, and the way you described it is pretty accurate, like a scene out of Hogwarts, Harry Potter. You're kind of like, where am I? What is this? But ended up being a wonderful experience, and glad I had it.
So we're going to get into this. What you have kind of hung your hat on is being a triathlete and then mountain climber and explorer. And I want to ask you about, you come out of Yale, and now rather than go off and we'll set that up. After Yale, what happens?
Yeah, so I was pretty young. I started college when I had just turned 17, and so I graduated when I just turned 21. I'm 32 now. So in 2006, I graduated from college, and most people in my graduating class were, I think 35% of my graduating class were headed for Wall Street jobs. So this is pre-crash, 2008. And that was kind of the paved road, especially for me as an economics major. It kind of seemed like that sort of where I was going to end up. But I kind of had a passion and drive to travel and see the world a little bit. Instead of taking these Wall Street internships in the summer, I would go home back to Portland and paint houses with my best buddy David. Yep. And then my dad lives in Hawaii now, and so we would spend some bunch of time in Hawaii as well when I could get over there. So basically kind of living somewhat of a different path than one of my other peers. And so when I graduated from college, I thought, at some point I was probably going to settle into a career probably in finance. But before doing that, I kind of wanted to spread my wings. So I decided to kind of scrape together a few pennies from that house painting job and go grab a surfboard and a backpack and kind of travel around the world on a shoestring. So I traveled to New Zealand, Australia, Fiji, up through Southeast Asia. Yep. It was an incredible experience until tragedy befell me in Thailand.
Okay, so let's talk about that. The name of this podcast, of course, is Finding Your Summit, about overcoming adversity. And here you are, a collegiate athlete. Everything's going great for you. And all of a sudden, you end up in a very sticky, scary situation that I'm sure set you back. Why don't you explain what happened?
Yeah, so I was in Thailand probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months into this journey around the world. And again, it had been an amazing experience traveling alone, kind of living in and out of hostels, eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, kind of just getting by. But, you're 22 years old, you're seeing the world, it doesn't matter, you're having a great time. Ended up on a beach in rural Thailand, a small island called Koh Tao in the Gulf there. And I decided that jumping a flaming jump rope seemed like a good idea.
And you explain what that is exactly.
It sounds ridiculous to say, but it's actually a fairly common tourist activity there. At some of the resorts or little guest houses there, the basically local Thai guys will, fire dance, literally light a rope on fire as if you were, jumping rope in the street as a kid, and people jump under it. And what normally happens, even when you trip on the rope, is that the rope will bounce off your legs, kind of like putting your finger through a flame of a candle, and you'll be fine. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't so lucky. The rope wrapped around my legs. There was excess kerosene on the rope that splattered me to my neck, and very quickly my entire body up to my neck was engulfed in flames. Fortunate for me, the ocean was about 10 steps away, so instinct kind of took over, and I went and dove into the ocean to extinguish the flames, which ultimately certainly saved my life, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned, basically mid-calf or mid-thigh down on both of my legs, my right hand. And it was a terrible set of circumstances, obviously a really painful and life-threatening injury, but also here I am in rural Thailand, and so the care that I received immediately was, a guy on a moped driving me down a dirt path to a one-room nursing station. There's no hospital on the entire island. Finally, after 24 hours in that situation, transferred to another small, tiny hospital where I underwent 8 surgeries. And there was a cat running around my bed in the ICU as I came out. Pretty much the last set of circumstances you want to find yourself in, particularly with an injury like burns, where infection can ultimately kind of kill you, and it's a terrifically painful injury to have. And honestly, the scariest thing at the whole time was that doctors were warning me like, hey, you probably never walk again normally. With how bad the burns were, particularly over my knee and ankle joints, ligaments, and that sort of things, there was a lot of damage that they thought would not be able to be sort of fully repaired and allow me to have sort of the same active lifestyle that I
had you come back to the States at this point?
No. So after about that first 8 surgeries, I was then finally transferred to Bangkok in a tiny little medical airplane. And that was kind of the furthest distance they felt like they could move me and be stable.
Which, by the way, is a crazy town too.
Yeah.
Like buildings are sideways. And crooked and everything.
Fortunate for me, the one thing I will say is that Bangkok is an international hub for healthcare, actually, and so it has some pretty great hospitals. Of course, it's not the United States, but the care was, on par, I would say, finally when I got there. So about 8-9 days into this journey, I end up in Bangkok, where I end up staying for a couple of months, and then finally transferred back to the United States. But when I was transferred back to the United States, even though a couple months had passed, I still hadn't taken a single step. I was carried on and off the plane in a wheelchair, and basically arrived back to Oregon, to the Oregon Burn Center, still in a very, very traumatic and injured place, still not knowing if I would really ever walk again.
What's it like to be, you're in such an active state, from swimming, running around the Northwest, camping, hiking, and then all of a sudden, you go through this, but some people, I've gone through my fair share of stuff, but at least I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm moving. And part of what's helped me get through a lot of that, my meditation, is actually being in the outdoors and exercising. And for you are just this, you can't move. You're immobile, right?
Yeah, no, and certainly activity, movement is such a huge part of my personal identity that it was, dramatically taken from me. And, that was a reality check for me, kind of, what is my life going to be like after this? What do I want to do with myself? Definitely sent me in a pretty negative downward spiral. And, thankfully enter my mother into the equation at this point. She arrived to Thailand about 4 or 5 days into this ordeal. And instead of coming in and crying beside me and being as afraid as, a mother should, and she certainly was in this situation, she came in with this sort of air of optimism, a smile on her face, and saying, you know what, this is horrible, but let's start thinking about the future. She's been a strong believer and ingrained in me the power of a positive mindset, and, no better place than to show it in what was this, is certainly, as I realized, in the long run. And so she kind of came in and said, hey, let's think about the future. Yes, this is terrible right now, but what do you want to do when you get out of here? What do you want your life to look like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Let's dream. And, for me, it was hard for me to play along with that for several days. I was very depressed and still in a ton of pain, but I finally said, fine, I'll play along. if I was healthy and fit again, what I would do is I would one day complete a triathlon. I had been a swimmer, but I had never biked or run collegiately or professionally or collegiately. And I thought, that's what an active, healthy, fit person could do. That's what I would love to do one day, just kind of aspirational in the future. And she said, great, well, that's your goal now. And so for the next 18 months, that's what I focused on every step of the way, literally from the first step I took in my mother's kitchen to taking 5 steps, to taking 10 steps, and ultimately being able to, walk across my house. This was, weeks at a time, we'd be celebrating one more step that I could take, literally. And 18 months in the future, I had moved to Chicago. I had started a job in finance, which I thought sort of was going to be my career, and, said, what, I think I'm ready to try this goal. And after having worked so hard to get my body back and learn how to walk again, I signed up for the Chicago Triathlon and started training for that.
And how far? What were those distances?
So it was an Olympic distance triathlon. So that was a mile swimming, 25 miles biking, and 6.2 miles of running.
Yep, I guess I've done one of those then.
Yeah,
a few of those.
So it's certainly a big challenge and something I'd never done before. And so I signed up, trained for it, raced the race, which all took place basically exactly 18 months after my burn accident. And crossing the finish line was a great joy for me, just to have proven that, despite these terrible odds, despite the doctors telling me I never walk again, sort of that positive mindset, and certainly having this tangible goal to work towards gave me the strength and perseverance to overcome this, tragedy. And so for me, crossing that finish line was kind of closing the door on that. But what was, certainly a huge surprise for me that day, that not only I had crossed the finish line, but I actually had won the entire Chicago Triathlon. Wow. Beating, almost more than 4,000 other participants on the day. And
so you're just going, that's interesting, right?
Yeah, like I said, I was over the moon, thrilled to just cross the finish line. That had been my goal, to race a triathlon one day. And then all of a sudden, not only had I raced this triathlon, but I had won the entire race, which opened the door for me to become a professional triathlete. So pretty quickly, I quit my finance job, got my first sponsor, and moved to Australia to begin a life of a professional triathlete, which is nowhere near the life of an NFL player like yourself in terms of lucrative contracts and that sort of things. But it was a great way for me to live my passion, and I'd always dreamed of being a professional athlete, and here was my window to do that. So 18 months earlier, I was told I couldn't walk again, and fast forward, here I was, beginning the life of a professional athlete. So it's a great testament for me and in my own life, and as I try to tell others, that you never know what's right around the next corner. Certainly, as you continue to work hard, persevere. The name of your show, Find Your Summit, whatever that summit is for you, I believe you can get there. And this was, what really, deeply taught me that lesson, was this experience. And so for the next 6 years after that, I raced as a professional triathlete in 25 countries, 6 different continents. It was an amazing experience.
So we'll get to that in a second. I want to reset something really quick that you said that to me really touched off something, which is about, when you put in the power of positivity, you can achieve really anything. And, I don't know, especially with when I went to the University of Washington is where I got a scholarship to go play football, and I was in so over my head when I first got there. I hadn't done the work in terms of lifting the weights and running, and I just didn't understand what it took to play at that level. And then the same thing with not so much I was ready to play in the NFL, but just, the odds of anybody making that, having those blinders on and pushing out the negativity of what anybody else might say, or what the inner voice might be talking to you in terms of having negative. I don't know if you can accomplish anything when you're in that state of mind.
Yep.
Right. So getting back to what you did say, you put together a game plan, you dreamt about something, a possibility, and then after you actually won this thing, now you're feeling very purposeful about, hey, this is my path, and we'll just see where it comes out. But that's where you're feeling the best and optimized, and now out of this whole thing, you get sponsored.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, just to double down on that for a second, as I've obviously, had this story, overcome this obstacle, become a professional athlete, and then ultimately, as I'm sure we'll talk about, set these 2 world records in mountaineering. Kind of people have asked me, how'd you do it? What was the process? And I recently gave a TED Talk, actually, and the name of the TED Talk is Change Your Mindset and Achieve Anything. Because as I've thought more and more about the entire process, it's less about the 2 world records I've set, or being a professional triathlete, or being in the NFL, whatever that is. That's just the canvas to explore that. But really, for all of us, what's the universal through line there? it is the power of positivity. It's the power of mindset. It's the power of having that determination towards a singular goal and working towards it. And I love what you mentioned about sort of negative self-talk. There's going to be a lot, no matter, talk to any successful person, they're going to tell you, oh, there was 100 people that never believed I could grow this company into this, or I could create this piece of art, or, excel at sports, or whatever, your thing is. And having been able to block out other people, but more importantly, block out your own voice, because for whatever reason, as humans, we are patterned to have doubts. And I'm not impervious to that at all in my own life, even as I go forwards, even having many, successes as well as failures in my life. You really have to have that daily determination to say, I believe in this, I'm putting my heart and soul into this, and have the passion to continue to move forwards, even when things don't go your way. Because they're bound not to.
No, well, that's just what happened. That's life, right? And I've got this thing called summits, and it's an acronym of accomplishment, and it's like the seed. You unleash your plan, then you move your plan, then you measure your plan, you improve your plan, and traverse. Things happen, and that's what you're talking about right now, where you're going down this certain path, and then obstacles coming your way. In my case, a divorce. The markets may change. Whatever those things are for different people. So it is that mindset. One of the things that I'm just absolutely committed to is along with this power of positivity, is if you want to be successful, hang out with successful people.
I agree with that.
And you got to keep the negative voices away from you. Okay. So for me, that's one of the things I try to do. Number two is I do daily affirmations, because even though, like you said, you're out there, you're doing some great things, you still have that little negative voice that jumps in your head. And, it's a constant fight about trying to push out those things when things don't look the way you want them to appear. So for me, and then the third thing I do is every single morning I get up and I go work out, because that's just firing all the neurons and getting, my mind in the right place of like, okay, I've accomplished this, and now I'm ready to attack the day.
Yeah. Morning routine. It's huge for sure.
Yeah, no, it's great. Okay. So, you go out and in terms of sponsorship, what's the return? I mean, so if somebody goes and sponsors an athlete, a triathlete, how does that guy that's putting the money out, how do they get their return on that?
Yeah. So to be perfectly candid, I happened into a really fortunate set of circumstances to begin my career, which allowed me to launch my professional career. A guy by the name of Brian Gelber in Chicago, who's a well-known trader, financial sort of star in Chicago. I have friends with him and his family, and I was working for a different firm at the time. I was not working for him, but he sort of heard about the story. I was at a barbecue at his house the day that I won the Chicago Triathlon, completely coincidentally, and he was like, wow, this is an incredible story. And he actually agreed to become my first sponsor, which allowed me to sort of take the first initial leap to quit my job and to pursue this. And for him, it's not as tangible of an ROI as you would for a brand partnership or something like that. But I have so much gratitude and debt to him for just, him believing in me and him seeing something in me when I was 24 years old. And ultimately he stuck with me for the past 6 or 7 years through this path of all the way through my path through triathlon, as well as being a huge support through the World Record Project as well. And that's something that has been just a tremendous blessing and tremendous gift from him and what he has had to support me. And he's become just a great friend and an incredible mentor. Someone, again, his canvas is the financial markets and trading, but he is an expert in that. And so him and I have had so many great conversations over time, and his mentorship has meant so much to me as he has been able to. We've had these great conversations about high performance, what it takes to succeed. He's had tremendous failures as well, ultimately been an incredibly successful guy, but of course the markets don't always go your way. And so how to weather those storms. And so we had some, great dialogue over the past, decade or so about all of that. So that was sort of my first sponsor and my longest standing sponsor through my career up to last year. But as I was able to then, from that sort of was the initial boost to get me out into the world, I was able to, as I got better in the sport, had better results, I was able to have more traditional brand partnerships. So that would be, someone like for my World Record Project, like Nike was a big sponsor, Mountain Hardware, companies that want to put their brand or logo or likeness around an idea or concept. So my World Record Project, not only was it about me breaking breaking these world records in mountaineering, but it was also about inspiring kids to live active, healthy lives, a huge promotional campaign around inspiring others to find their Everest, move their own bodies, live active, healthy and lives. So, brands are excited to partner with that, from different content and media plays. So really, you're in digital media, so you understand the very different avenues that are in that. And it's to be a professional athlete outside the scope of a traditional sports league where you're signing a contract and that's the lion's share of your income. Again, for me, it's been a far less lucrative path, but it's also been an entrepreneurial path. It's been a path of, finding the right partners, the right people that want to support you and wanting to work with people that are excited about what you're doing. So finding those people sometimes can be very challenging. But I've been blessed with having some wonderful partnerships, not only from Brian Gelber, but some other companies along the way.
I interviewed a guy, actually, he was a former teammate of mine a couple of weeks ago, Jerry Robinson. And so I went through, the opening with him and Jerry, how you doing? And he goes, Mark, I'll tell you what, every single morning I wake up with an attitude of gratitude.
Love it.
Yeah. And that's why I said, love it. And, I look at you and, what a blessing it is to be surrounded by mentorship and people who really want to springboard you in a way that took you towards a path you never would have imagined, doing TED Talks, climbing mountains, being in races, really living, as I said before, a purposeful life. And I am just, now I've come to the ripe old age of being in my mid 50s now. And I've been able to have a bunch of successes and I'm just kind of at this point in my life where I'd much rather be purposeful than driven by just the dollar. Right. Yeah. And to me, that's what a rich life is.
I agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
For
yeah.
sure.
So
there have been people who have asked me, you look back now when you were 23 years old and you changed away from this Wall Street path to be, the path that I followed. Do you ever regret that decision? Certainly you could have more money in your bank account now, this kind of stuff. And I said, my life has been so rich and full of life experience. I've followed my passion and followed my heart. And yeah, it's been a tough path. Don't get me wrong. Freezing at the top of Mount Everest or pulling a sled to the South Pole. And these things are challenging things, but maybe I'm a masochistic person, but that type 2 fun is what I thrive in and what I love. And having the opportunity to, from someone, like I said, who had never been in New York City until they were 16 years old, to now have been in 50 some countries in the past 6 or 7 years, to have been on every continent, to have been on reach the tallest point of each of the 7 continents, is a great blessing. And for me, no amount of money can change that. It's just the life experience and the people I've been able to surround myself with. I feel very fortunate.
I do believe that a lot of those people too, that they envy that life too, right? You kind of get stuck in the golden handcuffs a little bit. Right.
For sure.
Yeah. So, so good for you. Okay. So let's get into this 2-time record holder. What is that? What is that all about?
So in 2014, I was still racing triathlon professionally. I'd actually just come off a win and a half Ironman race. And it kind of struck me that although I had loved this path of becoming a professional triathlete, I had loved the past 5 or 6 years of traveling the world and racing and competing and pushing myself against the best athletes in the world, and having just won a race showed that I was still in, tip-top world-class form. It kind of hit me that I wanted to do something bigger, something that had, yes, still pushed myself. I still think of myself as an athlete today. There's many other athletic feats and projects that I want to pursue. But triathlon, for me, had somewhat run its course. I loved it. I don't regret a single day that I did it. But it was time for me to accept the next challenge, which was to still push my body at a high level, but also to do something that had a greater purpose beyond just my own sort of success or failure on the race course. As being from the Pacific Northwest, as we've already covered, I've always had a passion for the outdoors and mountains. And so I dreamed up this project, which was to see if I could set the world record for something called the Explorers Grand Slam. Mm-hmm. And so for the Explorers Grand Slam, it is to climb the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents, collectively known as the 7 Summits. Of course, we're sitting here with Mark, Mr. 7 Summits, NFL, and also reach the North and South Pole by crossing at least the last degree of latitude on foot. And so I dubbed the name of my project Beyond 7-2 for the 7 peaks and the 2 poles. And fewer than 50 people have ever accomplished the Grand Slam. Most of those people have done so in 10 or 15 years as a legacy or lifetime project. Yep. And I was aiming to become the fastest person to do it by climbing each one of those mountains with no rest in between, not going home in between, and just climbing consecutively without stopping. So it was a year and a half in the planning and preparation for all of this. Again, I didn't didn't have any money or sponsorship or funding to kick it all off. And so I had to go out and figure all that out. I started a nonprofit to make sure that my charitable mission and purpose, which was all around kids, active, healthy kids, promoting an active, healthy lifestyle, and really using the media arc of this, not to promote myself and my own feats, but really to promote this larger universal message about goal setting, reaching your full potential, living an active, healthy life. And so we partnered with an organization called the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, which does incredible work with school kids nationwide, and kind of fitting in with their programs to use sort of my unique story and path to elevate their message around health and wellness. And so there was a lot of different elements and moving parts to this entire project, but 2015 was full of doing that. And it was, I should mention for sure, myself and my fiance, Jenna Bisa. She was a full dedicated team member. She originally was like, oh, I'll help you out a little bit on this. And before helping out, and it turned into a 100-hour-a-week nonstop job for 2 years with very little financial reward. But I couldn't have done it without her, that's for sure. And so we kind of dreamed this project up together. And somehow, some way, despite countless setbacks, that would be another 10-hour podcast if we talked about all the setbacks we encountered along the way. Yep. We could talk about a few, but did it, successfully completed it. So I began in early 2016, and 139 days later, I found myself on the summit of Denali, having set the world record for the Explorers Grand Slam, but also having set the world record for the 7 summits just themselves. So I ended up setting two speed records.
Okay, so I get that now. I thought when I first was reading about this, I thought you had done it, then somebody else had beat you, and then you went back and did it again. I'm like, that is insane.
Yeah, so the 7 summits, which is what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
I'm also the fastest person to ever climb the 7 summits. So originally I had just been setting out to set the Explorers Grand Slam record. This is a good story. I actually talk about this a little bit in my TED Talk because it's a pretty pivotal moment for me along this whole journey. But I climbed Everest. Everest was the 8th of 9 expeditions. So I've been going for 130 some days at this point. And I started with the South Pole. And the way the record works, and both records work, is the clock starts when you reach the first summit or the first pole. In my case, it was the South Pole.
So you tag the top.
You tag the top.
It's
boom,
not.
The
It's
clock
not,
starts.
Okay.
It's not when you begin the expedition. It's when the clock starts. So Guinness World Record makes these rules, right? So that's how the rules. I don't make the rules up.
Yeah.
So that's when the clock starts. And
I want to make up their own rules, right?
And the clock stops. Actually, someone just showed me that Guinness Book just got published. I'm actually in the book this year,
That's
which
great.
is pretty cool. It's just kind of fun to see. It's a little childhood fun, boyhood fantasy for me.
Well, listen,
Anyways,
I'm trying to become the first NFL player to ever climb the 7 summits. So maybe I'll be in the
we'll be in that
Guinness,
next
right?
trip.
I'll be
hopefully. So, anyways, the clock starts when you reach the first summit or pole, and then finishes on the last summit. And when I came down from Mount Everest, it had been a pretty intense climb. Obviously, I'm 100 and some days into this journey at this point. And at this point, I'm about 2 months ahead of the Explorers Grand Slam world record. And so I think, great, I just have Denali left. I can, at least catch my breath down at Everest Base Camp for a few days, fly over to Alaska, maybe sleep a couple days in a hotel, and then begin climbing Denali, which normally, as you know, takes about 3 weeks to climb.
Yep.
And I get back down to Camp 4 on Everest, which is also known as the Death Zone. It's the highest, camp on Everest. You come down from the summit. And I had a pretty rough time. I actually had to make 2 attempts on the summit after getting caught out in a bad storm high on Everest. My first attempt, successfully climb it, call back home to Jenna on the satellite phone. I say, hey, I've done it. I've climbed Everest. That was, the hardest one. I've just got 1 mountain left to climb. And she goes, great. I'm going to need you to keep climbing all the way back down to base camp right now. I'm like, why? And she's like, well, we've been doing some math back home, and it just so happens that if you can get to the summit of Denali in the next week, then you can set not just the Explorers Grand Slam world record, but also the 7 summits world record. You're a competitive guy. Certainly you want to give that a shot. And I said, well, yes, but I just climbed Everest. I'm exhausted. Yeah. What's that going to take? And she said, literally, I need you to climb back to base camp right now. There's going to be a helicopter waiting to pick you up in base camp. It'll take you to Kathmandu. From Kathmandu, you don't have enough time to spend overnight in a hotel or anything like that, but there's a flight that'll take you to Dubai, Seattle, Anchorage, and then you'll have about 3 days to climb Denali rather than the customary 3 weeks. What do you think? Give it a shot. And so I didn't know what to laugh or cry at that moment, but I listened to her, executed the plan, and just 100 hours after standing on the summit of Everest, 8 expeditions into this, insane. I ended up at the base of Denali, and then climbed Denali over the next 3 days. And I actually would love to hear about your experience in the storm out there, because I got caught out in a really bad storm to try to make it up for my summit day.
Yeah, no, I made it up to 16.4, and we buried a cache up there, and then it was minus 60 degrees on top, and it was just like, you can't yeah, I mean, that's death or
Yeah.
fingers gone or something. So we had to go back down. I was really bummed about that. And I too think, I like to do things quick, and I happen to be able to go up. That's just one of my skill sets that, it doesn't, I don't know where you get this, but, moving at a fast pace. I mean, we had put 22 days to climb the mountain, and I could have done it. And I felt like I could have done it much quicker.
Yeah, sure.
Just when the window's open, go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. See, if the only benefit of climbing the mountains as quickly as I did during this project is, of course, I'm acclimatized from the previous mountain. So I had just been at 29,000 feet on Everest. So one of the reasons Denali, obviously, being 20,000 foot mountain, you can't just go to 20,000 feet from sea level. And so for me, I at least had the advantage of being pre-acclimatized. That said, I was 130 some days into this project and I was completely exhausted. But I had a climbing partner. I did most of the climbs, independently, not guided or anything like that, by myself or with a climbing partner, friend. And Everest, I climbed with myself and one Sherpa by the name of Pasang Bodhi, who's an incredible climber. And then on Denali, I met my friend Tucker Cunningham over on Denali, he's a great climber. And I said, hey, do you think we can try to get up this in 3 days? And he had actually been on Denali for about a week prior to that because he didn't know exactly when I was arriving. So he had already been pre-acclimatized a little bit as well. And he said, hey, let's give it a shot. We give it a shot. I mean, that'd be cool if you could set not just one, but the second world record as well. And so we get up to 14 camp, which is kind of like the main base camp, as you know. And
that took you one day to get there?
36 hours. Basically, we stopped. I got in late at night off the helicopter, off the plane. And then we went up to about 7,500, slept a night, then went up to 14. Yep. And then that night, basically at that point, I had about 24 hours until the clock was going to expire on the record, and a huge storm blew in at 14. There was about 60, 70 mile per hour winds that night, recorded at the ranger station there. The wind chill was, minus 50, minus 60, similar to what you're describing. And, it kind of looked like there was no way we were going to be able to climb this mountain. But we also, at that point, usually, as you know, you go up from 14,000 feet up to 17,000 foot camp and try to go from the summit from there. And we had decided, well, the only way we're going to do this is if we're going to be able to go to the summit straight from 14. So there's no way we're going to be able to put a camp in at 17,000. And all of a sudden it's, 50, 60 mile per hour winds. And we decided, I said, well, kind of still in that same sort of mentality of not knowing what the final outcome would be, but just kind of taking a few steps and just seeing what the next steps would look like. I said, hey, Tucker, do you think you can climb for 15 minutes? I think we can go towards the summit for 15 minutes and just test it out. And he's like, yeah, man, I'm here for you. And he's way more energetic than I am. And I owe so much of the success of this climb to him because he was totally up for, kind of pushing through some really tough circumstances. But we get all our climbing gear on. We're walking out of 14 camp. Someone literally unzips their tent and says to us, hey, are you guys bailing off this mountain? We hear the storm's going to last 8 or 9 days. We're thinking about going down too. And we said, no, actually, we're going up. Up where? We're going to try to go to the summit today. And they're like, get back in your tent. No one's climbing today. And truthfully, I will be honest about this. I would not have even attempted to climb the mountain on this day under any other circumstances other than I was trying to break this world record. I was definitely putting myself out there and taking a larger risk on a mountain than I normally would. And that's controversial. Should I have, stayed more true to my own climbing ethic, which would have not been to push through conditions like this, or, go for something that literally no one on the planet has ever done before. And so I opted to at least give it a shot. And, in the 15 minutes turned into 30 minutes, 30 minutes turned into an hour turned into 2 hours. And about 9 hours after leaving 14 camp, we ended up on the summit of Denali, pushing through a terrible storm. No one on the entire mountain climbed that day. Everyone stayed hunkered down in their tents. And we reached the summit of Denali. Luckily for us, the visibility was actually decent. So we could see where we were going. There wasn't a lot of precip, but it was just crazy windy. And as you know, when the wind kicks up there off the Bering Sea, it's the coldest, most brutal. So there's a small video clip or a couple photos that we took. Of course, I'm reaching the summit and setting these world records, and lifetime achievement for me, and something I'm tremendously proud of, and thinking about all the people that have supported me along the way, and getting very emotional. But you would think also there'd just be this huge smile on my face, like, wow, I did it. But the first clip of me is just this look of just this sunken, beaten, weather warm.
I appreciate that.
It wasn't until I was back down off the mountain, feeling safe again, warm again, that I finally was like, wow, I can celebrate and kind of take it all in. But it took every last ounce of courage and strength and determination and the support of others to make it to that final summit. And I've ultimately set those 2 world records.
Incredible. Awesome. somebody asked me about that. They go, hey, so when you get to the final summit, is it just like, catching that winning touchdown? And I said, actually, I have been very fortunate to be on the winning end of the last second, jump in the air, come down with it, be on Sports Illustrated cover, type thing. And it's in the moment. And what people don't understand is that you've made the summit of Everest, of Denali, of Aconcagua, these other ones, but you still got like either days or hours to go to get back down.
Oh, yeah.
You're so fried by that time, and it's not like that moment of jubilation, right?
Yeah.
Of just like you're in that just craze. Yeah, I mean, you go up there and you hug and you high five, and now I got to go down.
Oh, right? For sure. And any good mountaineer will tell you, the summit is just halfway.
Yeah.
And so it's great to get up there, but unless you get back down safely with all your fingers and toes, it's really not that celebratory of an event. And so it's not until you kind of get back down, like you said, get back to either a base camp or even off the mountain completely, that you can kind of totally unwind, because 80% of climbing accidents and fatalities happen on the descent. You've let your guard down a little bit. You're more exhausted. It's getting later in the day. The mountain's warming up. Things are moving around. There's so many things that can still happen, objective hazards and whatnot. And so mountaineering is strange in that way, that the finish line seems to be the summit of the mountain, but it's really not until you're all the way back down and safe and sound. And so there were certainly some jubilant moments in that. But it's when you're fully in that and fully immersed in that. And for me, again, I loved what you said about gratitude earlier. But for me, in those moments, were so much about gratitude. Of course, it was a personal accomplishment, but to me, that was an accomplishment on the backs of so many other people that helped and supported effort, me through that. And for sure, the larger purpose of it, which was, really not so much about me, but just showcasing that, you can be going through something terrible in your life. I could be burning a fire, told I may never walk again. And then 10 years later, here I am, summiting these mountains. And hopefully that, that is what lives on from this, and less about my own accomplishment, but others realizing that even if you're out there listening to this and you're in the middle of a hard time, that you can continue to move forwards one step at a time, and really, there can be some incredible outcomes on the other side of that. And certainly the work we did with kids, and that I continue to do with my nonprofit work. We did this whole campaign during that time, which was called "What's Your Everest?" with kids. And while I was climbing Everest and these other mountains, asking them, Colin's out there's climbing these mountains, and they were excited and engaged. We were kind of having all this social media. I was the first person to Snapchat from the summit of Everest, and some silly things like that.
I think I read about you in Outside Magazine. Maybe? Yeah, it's cool.
But these kids would send us messages, and they say, my Everest is to be the first person in my family to graduate from college. My Everest is to, be a scientist one day, and I want to study really hard. My Everest is to be a great athlete. I want to be the next Simone Biles. And this is, a 10-year-old girl. So I want to go work really hard towards that goal. And so it was amazing for me, much more than my own personal accomplishment, but to see this being used as a metaphor, and as with the name of your podcast, which I love, for other people just going for whatever it is in their life. Because that's what I think makes an incredible world. That's what I'm passionate about, of seeing people, work hard towards whatever is going to make them happy and fulfilled in their lives. Climbing mountains just happened to be my canvas, but that doesn't mean that I'm trying to inspire everyone to go climb all the mountains in the world. If you want to do that, awesome. That's great. I can tell you a lot about it. But really, it's just about having a purpose-filled life, and working towards things that you're passionate and fulfilled by.
Yeah. So, again, incredible, awesome, all the great words, around that. How much weight did you lose?
It's funny. I'm a pretty small guy to start with. When I was racing triathlon professional, I'm 6 foot tall. My race weight in triathlon was somewhere around 155, 157 pounds, very thin. I got myself up to about 170 before starting all of this, which is still relatively small. And as you know, it's not uncommon to lose 20 or 30 pounds just on a Denali expedition, or 20 or 30 pounds just on an Everest expedition.
I lost 17 pounds.
Yeah, totally normal. And the same thing of, dragging a sled across the North Pole or the South Pole. It's minus 40 every single day out there, and you're dragging a sled for 8-10 hours a day. People commonly lose, again, 10-20 pounds. So you start doing the math, and you're like, well, I'm already 170. I can't lose 20 pounds at the South Pole, 20 pounds on Everest, 20 pounds on Denali. I will be a no person. I won't exist anymore. And so, ultimately, I think I probably start at 170 and finish at about 160, even 139 days later. That was really, really strategic, and one of the, less, sexy adventure stories, but certainly one of the keys to my success was nutrition. Being super aware of that and what I was putting in my body. from being in Aconcagua up at high camp, 19,000 feet, your body just doesn't want to eat when you're up that high. For whatever reason, your metabolism is shutting down. You don't want to eat. Up at Camp 4 on Everest in the death zone, people are about to set out on what is most likely one of the hardest physical days they'll ever have in their life. And you see them put down, 2 bites of oatmeal is the only thing they can get down. They're like, that's enough. You're like, you just put 50 calories inside of yourself.
I know.
You're probably going to bonk. And so for me, I really had to fight almost my own physiology, my own psychology. It's like, my mind's telling me I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry. My body's telling me I can't hold anything in there. And I was like, but if I lose 20 pounds on Everest, I'm not going to be able to fly to Denali and climb it 3 days later. And so it was kind of an obsessive amount of force feeding myself at times, and then also replenishing myself with the best nutrition that I possibly could, given the remote locations I was in. So that was something I was hyper aware of the entire time. Unfortunately, didn't lose a ton of weight, but that was definitely one of the things that led to the success, was being able to maintain my weight throughout the time.
I don't know if you do the same thing, but that's been a challenge for me, and that's one of the as I progressed through my my journey of trying to climb the 7 summits, my nutrition. And my girls call me a manorexic because I just don't eat that much, right? Just in general. But and I have run into those same issues where you get to that summit day and you usually get up, as you know, in the middle of the night, and then you got to force down oatmeal or something else, and it's just like, it's like putting cement down your stomach, and it's very difficult. My little trick that I learned on Aconcagua from some guys is I put all these little Snicker bars, and I'm not a candy guy, I'm not a sweet guy, but that seems like I've got loads of these Snickers, and I break them up in these little chunk bites. And as I'm going up, I just drop one in. It tastes good. You get a little protein with the nuts in there, right? And so
it's a perfect mix. It's funny, like you said. Yeah, of course you're not sitting here in Hermosa Beach eating Snickers all day long, but it's funny when you're up there what your body craves. It's a whole different thing, and figuring out what works for you. For me, I in a very very similar type of way. It was I eat goo chews, so not the like goo gel packets, but the kind of chomp. Gummy chews. Same type of thing, just kind of progressively throughout the day. Every 20 minutes, popping a couple of those in my mouth. Just kind of another 50 calories, another 50 calories. But like consistently keeping that blood sugar, carbohydrate, protein balance in there is what works for me. And just kind of keeping a little bit of sweet in my mouth. Again, don't like candy. I'm not a sweet guy like when I'm down here, but a little bit of that sort of sugar and carbohydrates definitely for high performance in those type of super long days. I mean, some of those days are 10, 15 plus hours, middle of the night, exhausted, weather, wind, you got to keep fueling yourself. And it's funny, through the success of this whole thing, again, lots of great epic stories about big storms and pushing through and all this stuff. But there's a lot of subtler things that also lead to even being able to put yourself in a situation to climb through a tough night, which is, nutrition. And the other thing is staying healthy. For me, I was in all these airports, all these third world countries, flying all over the place, not sleeping properly, sleeping on planes. And one of the things that led to my success was obsessively washing my hands for 139 takes. Just being,
makes sense.
I'm a nail biter. I'm just like, I always have been since I was a little kid, but it's like, you're flying through from, Tanzania to Nepal or, wherever it is. It's like you start biting your nails, who knows what you can pick up in there. So, I mean, that sounds gross, but just these stupid things I had to rework and be like, you can't do that. You got to wash your hands. You got to make sure you get enough sleep when you can get sleep. You got to put the right nutrition. It's kind of all these sort of almost like a pilot's checklist of things I was constantly running through to maintain sort of my health and fitness throughout this project. And of course, I got more and more tired through the end, but, I was proud to come back, not only, successful with the records, but ultimately with my body feeling pretty good. It took me several months to really rest, recover, and fully recoup, but I didn't come back with any lasting injuries. I didn't come back with any cold, injuries, frostbite, anything like that. Yep. Which for me, that's how I define success even before this project. Success looks like setting the world record, sure, but success looks like coming back a complete, whole, healthy human.
That would be anybody's goal, to come back with 10 fingers.
Right,
and toes,
exactly.
Right?
No, for sure. But, the risks when you go up there.
Yeah, no, you do.
Frostbite is real, and things happen up there. So, those subtler little, like I said, less exciting stories, but that's a huge part of the success of a project that has this sort of long duration to it, is just figuring out how to be healthy day in and day out.
So one of the things I'm going to do once we go off the air here is to talk you into going back to Denali with me this next year. I'm going up there with Jim Morris, so maybe that's an enticer for you. But so what's next? As we kind of, wrap this thing up, you become the 2-time world record holder in this feat that you pulled off, which is remarkable. And you've got this foundation that's going. And now you were talking earlier about you've got new aspirations and things that you're trying to point out there. What are those things?
Yeah, so I haven't publicly announced any of my actual projects yet, so I'll be coy and not name them by name. But no, for me, it's multifaceted. It's been amazing to see, and ultimately this project, in terms of its media exposure and growth, grew beyond my wild expectations. To have hundreds of millions of media impressions and 50 plus million impressions on social, and the things that we were able to create from that were amazing, particularly for the larger purpose, like I said, of really getting this larger message out there. And so for me, as I move forwards in my career, I'm still passionate. There's a number of other physical activities that I'm working on, and physical feats, I should say, that I'm working towards. And excited about launching those, but doing that in a way that also tells a compelling story that inspires other people to get out there, to overcome obstacles in their own life, to chase their own dreams. And I'll continue to do my work with kids. I'm working on a book right now, so hopefully that'll come out next year at some point. And then one other thing that I can tell you that I am doing is a fun little project. A guy by the name of Jesse Itzler, incredible businessman. He's put together this thing called the 29029. And so he's taken Stratton, Vermont in October, the ski mountain, and invited a number of people out there. I think there's some few spots left, so if anyone wants to come tag along. But what it is to climb the mountain 29,000, it's called 29029 because that's the elevation of Everest. And so 17 laps of this ski mountain is climbing the same feet from sea level to the summit of Everest.
So you're talking about skinning up, or what?
There's no snow on it in October. It's on foot, and it's a race or a participation of sorts.
Go up and down.
Yes, you actually ride the gondola down, so you're only climbing up.
Okay.
The down actually for me you just said you like going up. I like going up as well. Going down crushes my knees.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't know. He has the whole weekend kind of blocked up for it. I think it'll take multiple days. I haven't kind of done the math a little bit in my mind. Maybe I'm not going to put a number on what I think it can be done in, but it certainly is a big challenge on the level of harder than an Ironman or something like that in terms of the amount of hours that it'll take to climb that many feet.
And what's the elevation?
So it's not at a super high elevation because we're on the East Coast. I just don't know exactly, but 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet. You're not talking about high altitude, but you're talking about literally. I recently tried to climb Mount Hood and Rainier back to back, which is two big Pacific Northwest mountains, and between those two, you're talking about 14,000 foot of elevation gain in the day, and that's a big day. And you're thinking, oh, that's only half of what we're talking about here. So yes, it's not technical. You're not roped up. There's not snow. There's none of those factors, but it's 29,000 feet consistently without stopping.
No, that's a lot. It's a grind.
So that's a fun, like I said, that's not one of my bigger projects, but it's a fun project that I have going up. I tell people to check it out. 29029.com, I think, is the website. It's a fun challenge. And this guy's, I think, as far as I know, dreaming up some other fun endurance projects, which I love. Obviously, as a professional endurance athlete and being out in the world doing this type of stuff, I love that. And I love that endurance sports, for me, bring together everyone. And as a professional triathlete, I loved, racing Ironman and other distances. Of course, I was racing as a professional, but I think it's fun that everyone races on the same race course on the same day. The professionals start first, but there's also the people that are going to, finish several hours, behind that. But they're achieving their own personal success on that. So for me, this 29029 is just another example of that. Like, I'm not trying to go in and win it, or it's not a professional race or anything, but it's a way to participate with a bunch of people who have trained hard to work towards a big and kind of random but exciting goal. I think you finish that, you climb 29,000 feet, you're going to feel something, fulfilled, tired, exhausted, elated. A little bit of both and everything, probably. So that's a fun thing I have coming up next month. And then, the best way to kind of keep track of me is I'm on social at Colin O'Brady, my website, beyond72.com. Definitely looking to get my other projects out there.
So beyond 7, is it /2 or just beyond 72?
7, the number 72, no slash.
Okay.
That's the website. And then, I would love, definitely maybe put in the show notes my TED Talk or any of that kind of stuff, as I love to sort of, share that message of change your mindset, achieve anything. That's kind of really what I really stand for, and what I love to put out in the world is the power of positivity and the power of a positive mindset. And so I'm on social, and stay tuned. There'll definitely be a couple of other big projects being announced soon, which I'm really excited to get out there and get on to the next thing. Because for me, it's not about reaching whatever summit you reach and then kicking your feet up and going, oh great, now I've done that, now I can just sit around. For me, it's always about the journey, reaching those summits, know, maybe that sounds cliche or trite, but for me, the excitement of this entire thing has been the dreaming of it, the planning of it, the working towards it, the people I've met along the way, the experience of it all, not just that, you know, fleeting moments on the summit is one thing. And it's great to finally find the finish line or achieve that goal, but it's really the process of getting there and the daily dedication to that. So it's exciting for me to be, you know, launching some new things.
Well, you're definitely walking the walk and talking the talk. And, you know, obviously I, you know, am trying to, I'm not doing this full time, but I'm trying to do this as much as I can.
Yeah.
And so every day is another step towards that goal. And, you know, when you're going and doing these different races or you're inviting people up to do this crazy up and down 17 different times, again, you're hanging out with successful people or people who strive to be happy, and that brings them happiness. And so you surround yourself like that, and your orbit continues to expand. You know, it can become very infectious. So anyways, I appreciate it. It's been amazing. You're an amazing guy. And just, you know, it's really cool to see people who have overcome things and gone on to do, you know, great things out there.
Mark, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye. Hey, this is Mark, and thank you so much for tuning in to the podcast this week. We had another great guest, and it is so awesome to continually have these different people on, talk about their different adversity, how they've overcome that, and what they've done to affect change in their life to become very successful. So, you know, really appreciate you guys tuning in. So, as always, we love the rating and reviews that you guys do on iTunes. If you haven't done that, please go do that. It really helps us in terms of increasing our visibility within Apple iTunes. And anyways, it's just fun to share the love and what these different stories, these different people are all about. So make sure you tune in next week. We appreciate it. And that's it. Bye.